Welcome to Books and More Audio, a channel that brings you powerful book summaries and timeless lessons to expand your mind, build wealth, and master your life. In today's video, we'll explore Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, the legendary book that has awakened millions around the world to the truth of financial freedom. Through the story of the rich dad and the poor dad, you'll discover that real wealth doesn't come from a paycheck. It comes from how you think and how you make money work for you. Introduction: Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I wrote these words with the deep belief that one of the main reasons the rich get richer, the poor stay poor, and the middle class struggles is because of the way we are taught about money. Money, something that governs almost every aspect of our lives, is rarely discussed in schools. We learn math, literature, and science, but no one teaches us how to make money work for us. Instead, most children grow up hearing the same advice: study hard, get good grades, and find a secure job. And so, many adults proudly hold degrees but lack the financial knowledge to build real security. As a child, I heard the same thing. My biological father, my poor dad, was a highly educated man who believed that academic success guaranteed a good life. My best friend's father, my rich dad, never finished high school, yet owned multiple businesses and enjoyed the freedom my real father never had. Both men were intelligent, hardworking, and loving, but their beliefs about money couldn't have been more different. One said, money is the root of all evil, while the other said, the lack of money is the root of all evil. One advised me to write a great resume, the other taught me to write a business plan. One saw a home as the best investment, the other said it was the biggest liability if you didn't understand money. At first, I didn't know whom to believe, but having two fathers forced me to think, to compare, and to question. Over time, I realized the power of thought itself, that the real difference between the rich and the poor begins in the mind. Poor people often say, I can't afford it, while rich people ask, how can I afford it? One statement closes the mind, the other opens it. My poor dad valued stability, education, and respectability. My rich dad valued freedom, learning, and control. One believed in working for money, the other believed in having money work for you. Watching the two of them shaped my thinking forever. My poor dad, despite his intelligence and dedication, spent his life worrying about bills and taxes. My rich dad, with far less formal education, understood how to make money grow and how to teach it. Both men valued education, but their definitions were different. My poor dad meant traditional schooling. My rich dad meant lifelong learning, learning about finance, investing, and how systems work. Schools teach you to work for money, my rich dad said, but they don't teach you how money works. When I was only 9, I decided to listen to my rich dad. That decision changed my life. He began teaching me the 6 lessons that form the foundation of this book. Lessons that reveal to me that true wealth doesn't begin in your wallet, it begins in your mind. The poor work for money. The rich make money work for them. That was the first truth I ever learned, and the one that has guided me ever since. Chapter 1: Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I had 2 fathers, one rich and one poor. My real father, the poor dad, was an educated, respected man with advanced degrees and a secure government job. My other father, the rich dad, was my best friend's father, a businessman who never finished high school but owned multiple companies and lived with freedom. Both men were successful in their own ways, but the paths they chose led to very different destinations. My poor dad always said, study hard, get good grades, and find a safe job. My rich dad told me, study to understand how money works and make it work for you. One believed, the love of money is the root of all evil, while the other said, the lack of money is the root of all evil. One taught me to write a job application. The other taught me to write a business plan. One called his home an asset. The other said it was a liability if it took money out of your pocket. As a child, I was confused. Both men were intelligent and caring, yet their beliefs clashed completely. If I'd had only one father, I might have accepted his advice as absolute truth. But because I had two, I had to think, compare, and decide for myself. Gradually, I began to see that the key difference between them was not in what they had, but in how they thought. My poor dad was driven by security, by the comfort of a steady paycheck. He valued education and stability. My rich dad valued independence. He focused on learning how systems and money truly functioned. He believed that if you only work for money, you'll spend your whole life serving those who understand how money works. He often said, "The rich don't work for money. They make money work for them." As I grew older, I watched how their beliefs shaped their lives. My poor dad, though brilliant, struggled with debt and taxes. My rich dad, less educated by traditional standards, built assets that generated income even when he wasn't working. He didn't just earn money, he made it multiply. Both believed in education, but they defined it differently. My poor dad believed in academic knowledge. My rich dad believed in financial intelligence, the ability to read numbers, understand cash flow, and see opportunity where others saw risk. School teaches you how to work for money, he said, but it doesn't teach you how money works for you. When I was 9 years old, I chose to follow my rich dad's path. He began teaching me how to think like an investor, not an employee. His lessons became the foundation of everything I later built. That was when I learned the most important truth. It's not how much money you make that matters, it's how you think about money. Poor people work for money. Rich people make money work for them. That single shift in mindset changed the course of my entire life. Chapter 2, Lesson 1. The rich don't work for money. The first lesson I ever learned from my rich dad came from an experience that seemed simple but changed the way I saw money forever. When I was 9, my friend Mike and I asked Rich Dad to teach us how to become rich. He agreed, but warned that his lessons would be very different from school. He hired us to work in one of his stores, paying only 10 cents an hour, a tiny amount even for that time. For 3 weeks, we worked hard, cleaning shelves and doing errands, but we felt cheated and disappointed. I thought he had broken his promise to teach us how to get rich. Frustrated, I confronted him and said I wanted to quit. He listened calmly and then said, "Good, you sound exactly like most of the people who work for me." Then he asked, "What have you learned so far?" I replied, "Nothing. You haven't taught me anything." He smiled and said, "Oh, I've been teaching you all along, just not with words. Life teaches through experience, not lectures, and the way you react to those lessons determines who you become." He explained that most people let life push them around, and when things get hard, they either give up or blame others. But a few people stop, think, and ask, "What is life trying to teach me?" Then he gave me the heart of his philosophy. If you don't learn to control your emotions, especially fear and desire, you'll spend your life being controlled by money. Poor people work for money. The rich make money work for them. At that age, I didn't fully understand, but his words stayed with me. He said, "Fear keeps people working for money. Desire, or greed, keeps them trapped in that cycle." People are afraid of not having money, so they get a job. When they finally earn some, they desire more comfort, more things, and soon they're back to working harder just to pay for them. That endless loop is what he called the rat race. When I thought I had learned my lesson, Rich Dad gave me a tougher challenge. "If you really want to learn, go back to work, but this time I won't pay you anything." At first, I was shocked. Work for free? But then I realized he was teaching me to see opportunities where others saw only unfairness. I agreed. A few weeks later, while working in the store, I noticed that discarded comic books were being thrown away, even though they were still readable. Mike and I collected them and started our own little comic book library in his basement. We charged kids 10 cents to read for 2 hours. Soon, we were earning money, even while we were at school. It was my first experience making money without working for it directly. Rich Dad was proud. "You've learned what most adults never do," he said. "You used your mind to create value. That's how the rich think." He taught me that real wealth comes from ideas, not labor. If I wanted to escape the rat race, I needed to learn how to think creatively and see what others ignored. He also warned me, "Don't let fear or greed run your life. When you feel fear, don't run from it. Think. When you feel greedy, don't chase blindly, plan." The poor let emotions drive them. The rich use emotions to guide their thinking. From that first lesson, I learned that freedom doesn't come from a paycheck, but from understanding how money works and how to make it work for you. The rich don't work for money. They learn, they create, and they make money serve their dreams instead of trading their lives for it. Chapter 3, Lesson 2, Why Teach Financial Literacy? After learning that the rich don't work for money, I wanted to know how they made money work for them. That's when my rich dad taught me the foundation of wealth, financial literacy. He said, "It's not how much money you make that matters, but how much you keep and how hard it works for you." Many people earn good money, yet stay broke because they don't understand how to manage or grow it. Money flows through their hands like sand, and they can't explain why. To make it simple, Rich Dad drew two diagrams. One was an income statement, showing money flowing in and out. The other was a balance sheet, showing assets and liabilities. He pointed to them and said, "The secret to getting rich lies here. The rich acquire assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities, but they think they're assets." Then he gave me a definition I would never forget. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That single idea changed how I viewed everything. Most people, he said, spend their lives buying liabilities, new cars, big houses, gadgets, believing they're building wealth, while in fact they're building debt. Their cash flow moves in the wrong direction. Income comes in, but expenses and loans take it right back out. Rich Dad used the perfect example, a house. My poor dad always said a home was his greatest investment. My rich dad disagreed. If your house costs you money every month, it's not an asset, it's a liability. He wasn't saying not to buy homes, he was saying to understand how money moves. When emotions control your thinking, he warned, financial intelligence disappears. People often buy to feel safe or proud, not because it makes financial sense. He explained that most people live trapped in the same cash flow pattern. They work for money, pay taxes, spend, and then work again to pay off what they bought. When their income increases, their spending rises just as fast. They buy a bigger house, a nicer car, more luxuries. The result? They work harder but never get ahead. Rich people, however, direct their cash flow toward assets that generate income, businesses, stocks, real estate, or intellectual property. And those assets then pay for their lifestyle. The key to wealth, Rich Dad said, is to understand numbers. You must know where your money comes from and where it goes. If you don't, someone else will control it for you. That someone else could be your employer, the bank, or the government. Poor and middle-class people spend their lives making others rich, while the rich focus on building and protecting their own assets. As I grew older, I saw how true that was. It wasn't about working harder. My poor dad worked harder than anyone I knew. It was about working smarter, guided by financial awareness. My rich dad taught me that money is only a tool, and unless you learn how to handle it, it will handle you. From that day on, I understood that financial freedom begins with education, not luck or inheritance. Rich people buy assets that generate income. Poor people buy things that create expenses. The difference between rich and poor isn't how much they earn, but how they think about money. When you master the language of finance, you take back control of your life, because money, like any language, only serves those who understand it. Chapter 4, Lesson 3, Mind Your Own Business. When I was young, my rich dad often said, "Take care of your own business." At first, I thought he meant I should start a company, but his lesson was much deeper. He explained that most people spend their lives working for someone else's dream, for their employer, for the government, and for the bank. They work hard to make others rich, but rarely stop to build something truly their own. Don't just work to earn a living, he said. Work to build your assets. That's your real business. Rich Dad believed that financial freedom comes when your assets generate enough income to cover your expenses. A job can feed you for a while, but assets will feed you for life. Your profession pays the bills, he said, but your business builds your wealth. To him, every person should have a personal business, a growing collection of assets that work quietly in the background, whether you're awake or asleep. He taught me to look beyond the illusion of job security. Most people rely on a paycheck and call that safety, but true security lies in independence. When you work for others, he said, you build their wealth. When you work for yourself, you build freedom. The rich don't rely on one source of income, they create multiple streams. My poor dad believed owning a home was the greatest investment. My rich dad disagreed. A home isn't an asset unless it puts money in your pocket. It's often the biggest liability people have. He warned me not to confuse pride with profit. Many buy bigger homes or new cars to feel successful, but they end up tied to debt, working harder just to maintain appearances. You can look rich and still be broke, he said. Instead, he encouraged me to build assets early and consistently, even if small at first. Stocks, bonds, real estate, businesses, or intellectual property. Anything that produces income. Plant the seed now, he said, and one day you'll sit in the shade. He didn't mean to quit a job recklessly, but to shift focus. Use your job to fund your investments, not your lifestyle. He also taught me the difference between earning and building. Many people work hard for promotions or raises, believing that a higher salary means progress. But higher income often leads to higher expenses, more taxes, more loans, more spending. Rich Dad said, don't aim for a bigger paycheck, aim for a bigger asset column. The true measure of success isn't your income, it's your cash flow. How much money keeps coming in even when you stop working. He constantly reminded me, don't chase titles, build systems. People who depend on their jobs are like tenants in someone else's building. The rich build their own buildings, businesses that create value long after they stop working in them. He also taught me the difference between earning and building. Many people work hard for promotions or raises, believing that a higher salary means progress. But higher income often leads to higher expenses, more taxes, more loans, more spending. Rich Dad said, don't aim for a bigger paycheck, aim for a bigger asset column. The true measure of success isn't your income, it's your cash flow. How much money keeps coming in even when you stop working. He constantly reminded me, don't chase titles, build systems. People who depend on their jobs are like tenants in someone else's building. The rich build their own buildings, businesses that create value long after they stop working in them. Over time, I understood that minding your own business isn't about ignoring your employer or quitting your job. It's about shifting your mindset from employee to owner. It's realizing that your greatest responsibility is to yourself, to grow your financial foundation every single day. Rich Dad's words still echo in my mind. Work your job, but build your business. Invest in assets. Protect your time. One day, when your assets pay your bills, you'll finally be free. That's when I learned the true meaning of wealth. Not having to work for money, but having money and ideas working for you. Chapter 5, Lesson 4, The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations. Rich Dad often told me, The rich don't evade taxes, they simply understand the rules better than everyone else. As a child, I didn't grasp what he meant. But as I grew up, I saw the truth. My poor dad worked hard, paid his taxes faithfully, and still struggled. My rich dad, however, knew how to use the system legally to protect his money and make it grow. The difference wasn't in morality, it was in financial intelligence. He explained that taxes were originally created to target the rich, but eventually became a burden on the middle class and poor. When governments first introduced income tax, people supported it because they thought only the wealthy would pay. But as the system evolved, taxes spread downward. The rich hired smart accountants and lawyers who knew how to minimize taxes legally, while employees, whose income was easy to track, ended up paying the most. Rich Dad drew a simple comparison for me. The poor and middle class work for money and pay taxes first. The rich earn, spend, and then pay taxes on what's left. In other words, employees are taxed before they can use their money, while business owners and investors spend money on necessary expenses, first, travel, equipment, training, investments, and pay taxes on the remainder. The difference, he said, isn't luck or injustice, it's knowledge. He then introduced me to one of the most powerful tools the rich use, the corporation. A corporation, he said, is not just a business, it's a legal entity that offers protection, tax advantages, and flexibility. Through a corporation, he explained, you can control everything while owning nothing. This structure allows the rich to reduce risk, shield assets, and leverage the system to work in their favor. To make it clear, he drew two simple flowcharts. For employees, income, taxes, expenses. For corporations, income, expenses, taxes. The difference between the two determines who becomes rich and who stays trapped. The government doesn't write laws to punish the rich, he said. It writes laws to reward those who create jobs, build businesses, and contribute to the economy. When I asked him if that was unfair, he smiled and said, "No, it's an opportunity. The same laws that protect the rich are available to everyone who learns how to use them. The problem is that most people never take the time to learn. Schools don't teach this knowledge, and so people work their whole lives without understanding the game they're playing." Rich Dad also gave me a bit of history. Taxes began as a temporary measure to punish the wealthy in England and later in America. But when ordinary citizens saw the benefits of government spending, they supported higher taxes, without realizing that over time, the burden would fall back on them. Meanwhile, the rich adapted quickly, finding ways to protect their earnings through legal structures. He told me, money always flows to those who understand it. A person who studies finance, accounting, and law can use the system to grow richer, while those who avoid learning about money become servants to it. You can complain about taxes, he said, or you can learn how to make them work for you. From that lesson, I learned that true financial freedom requires understanding how the rules are written and playing the game with intelligence, not emotion. Corporations, investments, and laws are not enemies of the average person. They're tools waiting to be used. As Rich Dad said, the difference between the rich and everyone else isn't income. And that was his message to me. Don't work harder for money, work smarter through knowledge. Learn how the system works, use its rules to your advantage, and build structures that protect and grow your wealth. Because in the game of money, ignorance is far more expensive than taxes. Chapter 6, Lesson 5, The Rich Invent Money. Rich Dad often told me, the poor and middle class work for money. The rich create money. For years, I didn't understand what he meant. How could anyone create money? But as I grew and learned from him, I realized he was talking about creativity, not counterfeit. The rich don't wait for opportunities, they invent them. They see potential where others see problems, and they use knowledge, courage, and imagination to turn ideas into income. He explained that the biggest difference between the rich and the rest lies in how they think about risk. When an opportunity appears, most people say, "What if I lose?" The rich ask, how can I make it work? The poor let fear and doubt paralyze them, while the rich use analysis and experience to manage risk intelligently. Money is an idea, he told me. If you can learn to think creatively, you can make money appear, legally and ethically. Rich Dad taught me that financial intelligence consists of 4 key skills: accounting, investing, understanding markets, and the law. Master these and you'll always recognize opportunity. Opportunities are everywhere, he said. The problem is that most people aren't trained to see them. The uneducated eye sees danger, the financially educated mind sees possibility. He reminded me of one of his favorite sayings: money doesn't disappear, it simply moves. It flows from those who don't understand it to those who do. That's why, during financial crises, while most people panic and sell, the rich buy. I remember watching Rich Dad calmly invest when the economy seemed to collapse. When everyone else is afraid, he said, that's when wealth quietly changes hands. He wasn't lucky, he was prepared. He explained that to create money, you must first create value through a business, an idea, or an investor's overlook. Poor and middle-class people believe they need money to make money. The rich know that ideas, not cash, are the real currency. A good idea attracts money because investors always look for people who can turn concepts into profit. The most valuable asset you have is your mind, he said. Train it to spot opportunities instead of obstacles. Rich Dad also warned me about fear and greed, 2 forces that control most people's financial lives. Fear keeps them from taking risks, and greed blinds them when they finally succeed. When you feel afraid, don't run. Think. When you feel greedy, don't rush. Reflect. He taught me that emotional intelligence is just as important as financial knowledge. The rich aren't fearless. They've simply learned to act despite fear. He also reminded me that success isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. The difference between a winner and a loser, he said, is that the winner failed more times and kept learning. Every financial mistake is a lesson if you choose to see it that way. Over time, I came to understand what he truly meant by creating money. It wasn't about printing cash or chasing get-rich-quick schemes. It was about developing the mindset to spot opportunity, the skill to act, and the discipline to learn from every outcome. Wealth isn't found in a paycheck. It's found in insight, creativity, and action. Rich Dad summed it up perfectly. You don't need money to make money. You need intelligence, courage, and a good idea. That was the essence of his 5th lesson, that financial freedom doesn't come from luck or inheritance, but from the ability to think differently. The rich don't wait for the world to give them opportunities. They invent money by creating value and turning knowledge into power. Chapter 7, Lesson 6. Work to learn, don't work for money. The final and perhaps most profound lesson Rich Dad taught me was this: work to learn, not to earn. For most of my life, I'd been told that the purpose of education was to get a good job, earn a stable income, and climb the corporate ladder. But Rich Dad turned that belief upside down. He said, if you work only for money, you'll spend your life serving those who understand it better than you. But if you work to learn, you'll eventually make money serve you. He explained that most people specialize too early. They learn one skill, get comfortable, and spend decades perfecting it. But in doing so, they trap themselves in dependence. The more specialized you become, he said, the harder it is to break free. Financial freedom requires a broader kind of education, one that combines business, marketing, communication, and leadership. The rich aren't necessarily smarter. They just understand how the pieces fit together. Rich Dad encouraged me to learn from experience, not just from books. He made me take jobs that taught real-world skills, selling, managing, and leading others, even if they paid little or nothing. When I complained that those jobs didn't make sense, he smiled and said, "You're not here to make money. You're here to learn how money and people work." Over time, I realized he was right. Every great entrepreneur, every successful investor first learned to sell ideas, products, or themselves. My poor dad used to say, find a stable job with good pay and benefits. My rich dad said, find a job that teaches you something valuable. He believed that money should never be the main reason to work. Learning should be. Once you know enough, the money will follow naturally. People who chase paychecks often stay stuck in fear. Those who chase knowledge eventually gain control. He also warned me about the most dangerous kind of laziness, mental laziness. People say they're too busy, he said, but that's just an excuse to avoid learning. They work hard to protect their comfort zones, ignoring the fact that comfort kills growth. The moment you stop learning, you start becoming replaceable. Another obstacle he mentioned was fear of failure. Most people avoid mistakes because they're afraid of being wrong or embarrassed. But failure, he said, is the best teacher. Winners aren't people who never fail. They're people who fail and keep learning. Every mistake carries a lesson that no classroom can provide. Rich Dad emphasized that success in life is built on communication and leadership. You can have the best ideas in the world, he said, but if you can't communicate them or inspire others, they die with you. He taught me to speak clearly, sell confidently, and lead with empathy, skills that turned out to be more valuable than any degree. As I grew older, I realized what he had been preparing me for. He wasn't training me to be an employee. He was shaping me to become an owner, someone who could understand every part of a business and guide others effectively. He said, "The rich are generalists. They learn a little about everything and know how to bring the right people together." In the end, I understood his message. Working to earn will keep you surviving. Working to learn will help you thrive. Money can vanish, jobs can disappear, but knowledge and skill will always stay with you. True wealth isn't measured by income, but by the ability to create, adapt, and keep growing. Rich Dad's final words on this lesson still echo in my mind. The world is full of talented, broke people. Don't just be skilled, be financially intelligent. Learn every day, fail forward, and never stop growing. That's how you stop working for money and start making money work for you. Chapter 8. Overcoming Obstacles. After learning the 6 lessons from Rich Dad, I thought the path to financial freedom would be straightforward. But soon I realized that knowledge alone isn't enough. The real battle happens inside us. As Rich Dad said, it's not the economy, your boss, or the government that keeps you poor. It's your own fear, doubt, laziness, arrogance, and bad habits. This chapter is about conquering those inner enemies that stop most people from achieving wealth. The first obstacle is fear. Everyone fears losing money, but the difference between the rich and the poor is how they handle that fear. Rich Dad told me, the rich also fear losing, but they refuse to let fear control them. Failure isn't the end, it's a teacher. Poor people avoid failure and, as a result, avoid growth. Rich people fail often but learn faster. If you want to be rich, he said, you must learn to lose and still move forward. The second obstacle is cynicism. Doubt is the killer of dreams. When you share your ideas, people will always say, that won't work, or it's too risky. Rich Dad called them chicken littles, people who let fear rule their thinking. Cynics criticize, but winners analyze, he said. The problem isn't lack of money, it's lack of vision. Instead of listening to negative voices, rich people focus on facts, numbers, and opportunities. They replace fear with curiosity. The third obstacle is laziness. Rich Dad explained that it's not always physical laziness, but emotional laziness, being too busy to think. Many people use work as an excuse to avoid facing their financial problems. They say, I'm too busy to learn investing, or I'll think about that later. But busy often means avoidance. Rich Dad told me that true laziness is failing to prioritize what matters. Don't work harder, he said, work smarter and on yourself first. The fourth obstacle is arrogance. Arrogance, Rich Dad said, is the combination of ignorance and ego. People who think they already know everything stop learning, and that's when they fall behind. The financially intelligent stay humble. They ask questions, seek advice, and learn from everyone, even their competitors. Every person you meet, he said, knows something you don't. The moment you act like you know it all, you stop growing. The final obstacle is bad habits. Habits determine destiny. Most people are stuck in patterns, spending before saving, seeking comfort instead of challenge, reacting instead of planning. Rich Dad taught me to ask one question every day. How is this action helping my money work for me? He said the difference between the rich and everyone else isn't intelligence, it's discipline. You don't need a fortune to start, he said. You need consistency. I realized that these obstacles never disappear completely. They return each time you make a financial decision, when you invest, when you take risks, when you try something new. But each time you recognize and overcome them, you grow stronger. Success isn't about never feeling fear, doubt, or pride. It's about mastering them. Rich Dad's voice still echoes in my mind. The poor let their emotions control their thinking. The rich make their thinking control their emotions. When you learn to conquer what's inside you, the world outside becomes easier to manage. True wealth begins not with money, but with mindset. Overcoming fear, doubt, laziness, arrogance, and bad habits is the real foundation of financial freedom. Because before you can win with money, you must first win with yourself. Chapter 9. Getting Started. When I asked Rich Dad where to begin after learning all his lessons, he smiled and said, "You've already started by asking that question." But he also reminded me that understanding alone means nothing without action. Knowledge is useless without execution, he said. Money comes to those who move. This chapter is a guide for turning financial awareness into daily practice, a roadmap for building real freedom step by step. The first step, Rich Dad said, is to set a clear goal. If you don't know what you want, you'll spend your life working for someone who does. Financial freedom isn't just about money, it's about purpose. You must know why you want to be rich. Whether it's to gain independence, help your family, or live on your own terms, your reason must be strong enough to push you through fear and setbacks. Money is not the destination, it's the tool to create a meaningful life. The second step is to commit to continuous learning. The world changes fast, he said, and only those who keep learning can stay free. Rich Dad urged me to study business, markets, psychology, and self-development. Don't just read, observe, experiment, and reflect. Real education doesn't end at graduation. It begins when you start applying what you learn. Every mistake becomes a lesson if you choose to see it that way. The third step is to take small, consistent actions. Most people wait for the perfect time to start investing or building something, but that moment never comes. You don't need a lot of money to begin, Rich Dad said. You just need to begin. Start with small investments, save intelligently, or learn a new skill that makes you more valuable. Success isn't built overnight. It's the result of habits repeated over years. The fourth step is to surround yourself with the right people. Your environment shapes your thinking, he told me. If you spend time with people who complain, you'll learn to complain. If you spend time with dreamers and doers, you'll learn to build. The rich surround themselves with people who challenge them, not those who comfort them. Mentorship and community are accelerators of success. No one grows alone. The fifth step is to stay strong when difficulties come. Rich Dad warned me that the road to financial freedom isn't smooth. You'll lose money, face criticism, and doubt yourself, he said. But that's where character is built. Winners don't avoid pain, they use it. Every challenge tests your discipline and sharpens your intelligence. The world doesn't reward those who quit when it's hard, he said. It rewards those who adapt and keep moving. Finally, Rich Dad taught me to give back. He believed true wealth isn't about hoarding money, but about sharing wisdom and opportunities. The more you give, the more life gives you, he said. Money flows like energy. It grows when it moves. By helping others learn and rise, you strengthen your own success. Looking back, I understood that getting started wasn't about opening a business or buying an asset. It was about changing how I thought. Once your mind shifts from "I can't" to "How can I?", the journey has already begun. Rich Dad's final advice stayed with me. You are the miracle you're waiting for. Don't wait for luck. Start now, learn, act, and grow. That's how every great journey begins. Not with money in your pocket, but with belief in your mind and a decision in your heart. Chapter 10. Still want more? Here's what to do. After learning all 6 lessons and facing the obstacles on the path to financial freedom, Rich Dad left me with one final message. Knowledge alone is not enough. If you truly want to change your life, he said, you must turn ideas into habits and action. This last chapter is a call to move, a practical guide for anyone ready to live what they've learned. The first thing Rich Dad emphasized was building a strong desire. He told me that most people stay poor not because of bad luck, but because they lack the burning will to change. The moment your reason to be rich becomes stronger than your excuses, you'll find the way, he said. Financial success begins not with money, but with motivation. Without a strong why, you'll give up at the first obstacle. The second principle is choosing your environment wisely. Surround yourself with people who challenge you, not those who keep you comfortable, Rich Dad said. Your mindset mirrors the people you spend time with. The rich grow richer because they learn from other ambitious people, from mentors, partners, and friends who share their hunger to grow. Negative, fearful people drain your energy. Positive, driven people expand it. The third step is taking small but consistent action. Don't wait for the perfect time. It doesn't exist, he told me. Start with what you have. Read a financial book, attend a seminar, buy a small investment, or start a side business. Momentum is more important than perfection. The sooner you begin, the sooner you learn. The road to financial independence is long, but every step counts. Fourth, he reminded me to keep learning. Markets, technologies, and opportunities change constantly, so education never ends. The moment you stop learning, you start losing, he said. Financial intelligence is a living skill. It grows only when you feed it. Study investing, business systems, and human behavior. Read, observe, and ask questions. The more you know, the more opportunities you can see. Fifth, Rich Dad spoke about taking smart risks. Playing it safe is the biggest risk of all, he said. Most people are so afraid of losing that they never win. The rich don't gamble. They calculate, prepare, and act. There's no such thing as a risk-free life, he reminded me. But if you understand what you're doing, you can turn risk into reward. Courage is built through small acts of bravery repeated over time. Finally, he taught me about giving back. True wealth, he said, is measured not by what you keep, but by what you contribute. When you help others succeed, you open the flow of abundance in your own life. The more value you create for others, the more value returns to you. Money is energy. It grows when shared wisely. As our final conversation ended, Rich Dad told me, wealth is not the goal. Freedom is. And freedom begins the moment you take responsibility for your own education and your own life. Looking back, I realized that Rich Dad, Poor Dad isn't just a book about money. It's a book about mindset. It teaches that anyone, regardless of background, can learn to think differently, act boldly, and build their own path to freedom. As Rich Dad said, don't wait for luck. You are the opportunity you've been looking for. Learn, act, and keep going. That's how the rich get richer.